I'm Richard Robinson. I grow certified organic vegetables and Christmas trees in Sherborn, Massachusetts. About an acre and a half of vegetables, about 2 acres of Christmas trees, and then 5 acres of hay because I can't do anything else in those fields because I don't have time to grow 5 acres more vegetables. I had 3 hoop houses. You can see them there on the screen. I can't tell. I'm not sure whether this thing works as a pointer on the screen. Oh, it does. How nice. These 2 right here, the first ones I got, as I was saying before a couple of you walked in, through the EQIP grants. Those are rolling hoop houses. I'll talk more about those at the very end. But anybody interested in rolling hoop houses? You know even what I'm talking about? Okay, I'll explain it toward the end, and they're interesting. They're great. And then this one here is a 96-foot long stationary house, which I actually took possession of a couple of years before I built the others, but then sat in my field unassembled until a couple of years later. I grow mostly no-till, permanent beds, 4 feet on center, beds nominally, therefore 30 inches wide, but mostly in fact I grow 2 feet wide with about a 2-foot pathway. I just can't, I don't have the discipline to walk like this when my crops are being assembled. Just a couple things to get out of the way real quick, and then I want to spend most of this time talking about the nuts and bolts, literally and figuratively, about how to build hoop houses. But when I talk about hoop house, I'm mostly talking about an unheated structure in the ground, growing in the ground, plastic covered. There are certainly people, and they're very good growers who grow with supplemental heat into their hoop houses. They're generally not growing, at 60 or 70 degrees in the winter, because if you try to do that in the winter, you're just going to go broke. Maybe that's not true. Maybe you can grow enough stuff. I don't know. But mostly, I'll be talking, for my purposes, I'll be talking about in-ground, unheated hoop houses. Somebody in one of the questions asked about double versus single layer, and I'll talk about that as well. I use single layer hoop house plastic, but there are double layers. We'll talk about what those are about. And that's really quite a bit different than what is typically thought of as a greenhouse, which is usually a glass structure, heated with growing on benches, or growing in pots, or growing in bags, and or hydroponic. And those typically are large commercial operations, and typically in southern climates, because again, the heat is just has become untenable. You may or may not have heard the word protected culture. Andrew Mefford, who is now the editor of the, I always forget the name of this newsletter, Market.
Growing for Market.
What is it?
Growing for Market.
Growing for Market. Thank you very much. Growing for Market, which is a very, very good once a month newsletter magazine called Growing for Market. He's the editor of it. If you're interested in being a market grower, it's a very good publication to get. Anyway, he has a book, which I'll reference. No, actually, I won't, so I'll say right now. He has a book, the Hoop House and Greenhouse Growers Handbook, which is talks about this idea of protected culture, that they're both protected culture. My take on it, despite the fact that it's an excellent book, is that those two systems, heated versus unheated, are so utterly different in what you can accomplish and how you accomplish them, and what you're able to do to and with your plants, that I think it's better to sort of keep them divorced and talk about them as separate systems. So this workshop is about growing in the ground in unheated hoop houses. I probably don't need to tell you why a hoop house, but season extension for all kinds of people, homesteaders, gardeners, and especially for market farmers, has become over the last 15, 20 years the way to be a market farmer in New England, because you can have a season that's anywhere from 3 to 5 months longer. A month and a half, say in the spring, and then 2 to 3 months in the fall of extra growing time if you're growing in hoop houses. Low hoops will do much of that for you, not all of it by any means, but there are plenty of ambitious growers who have a hoop house after they sort of got up and running with low hoops or just row cover on the ground. For cold hardy crops like lettuce and radishes and beets and things like that, you could cover them with a layer of row cover out in your field, a couple layers of row cover, and get pretty far into November with just those things. I'm certainly not here to tell you that you need a hoop house in order to harvest a good lettuce crop in November, because you don't. Some years you might, some years we have just penetrating frost early, but then usually the last couple of days, if you go out and really cover that stuff on the ground, it'll get through because your ground's not frozen and they're still able to bounce back. You can't grow tomatoes into November, and frankly, you probably can't in a hoop house either, for the most part. It's just it gets down to 25 degrees outside, and unless you're pumping heat into your greenhouse at night on that night, your tomatoes are freeze. Your peppers might make it, but your tomatoes probably. Other really, what I think of as an extraordinarily sort of unheralded value of hoop houses is the ability to trellis your indeterminate tomatoes and cucumbers. You can just go to the ceiling with them and just get huge production. And especially with cucumbers, you get them off the ground. And that's really nice. Hi, come on in.
Hi, sorry.
You got something in the chat. This year we can almost go through the whole winter. Crazy climate crisis. Yes, it's true. And then the other value of I think of having a hoop house is that it is protected, and it's protected from cucumber beetles. And if you try to grow cucumbers commercially, it is a bear unless you've got screen covering, because the cucumber beetles will come in and they'll just drop, they'll just kill you. Okay. Yeah. We just did that. What just happened? I went back and forward. Yeah, site considerations. There are no absolutes, but there are some things that I really encourage you to keep in mind, to think about where to site a future hoop house. The orientation, these houses, my houses are oriented east-west. They don't have to be. I'm not sure that really is any kind of a deal breaker at all. I have not tried going in north-south hoop house. It's actually pretty common in the south. The reason given for an east-west orientation simply has to do with how the sun moves across and what kinds of shadows your end walls are casting onto your crop. And the end walls do tend to have a little more shadow casting than the long faces. But it's not a deal breaker, I think, at all. And the way I like to think of it is, if I were a row of plants standing in my hoop house and the hoop house was oriented this way and my row was standing, I was oriented this way, would I mind it that much if somebody turned the hoop house 90 degrees on me? No, I wouldn't. The sun would still go like this. I'd still get lots of sun. I don't think orientation is a major issue. If you've got a perfect site that's a north-south site, I can't tell you to do it, but I would not tell you not to do it. I think it's probably possible. And then other considerations, drainage, snow removal, and space for a second hoop house. I really think this is something to think about, because if you would have, a future as a market grower, one is good, two is out of sight, because it allows you to treat those two differently, especially, for instance, as concerning cucumber beetles, screening on, not screening. Screening is not great, by the way. It really cuts down on air infiltration. So there are reasons not to screen that. Yes, ma'am.
For the equipment kit.
Yeah. Yeah, let's say equip, because we hate that other word.
So it has to be 15 feet, they tell me.
Has to be 15
feet, no matter how big your house, for snow removal.
between
purposes.
houses.
Or open on either side.
Yeah, you have to open on either side. Yeah, I'm very glad to hear that, actually. For those at home who didn't hear the question, it was about equip funding, 15 feet open on either side
Right.
in order to
You
do
can
with
just have
snow.
planted. And you can plant stuff on either. side,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
You
And
can't,
that's,
I guess, have your barn there, I don't know what would be permanent.
yeah. And that's really, actually, it's a really nice point, because mine are, these two are, that's 10 feet, it might be 12 feet, but it's not 15. And because they move, and because they have an annual cycle that goes like that, they're never actually right next to each other. But were they to be right next to each other, snow removal would be an issue, even with a really powerful snow blower. Because you got, a 50-foot long hoop house, and you're trying to blow snow, and you got a snow blower that can blow maybe 35, 40 feet if it's really light and fluffy. You got a problem. So 15 feet is good, because it allows you to put just about all your snow to the side, rather than have to push it on beyond. I made a little chart here, this is perfect. I don't have electricity to these houses. That road is kind of all season, but not really. So I'm down in here, except I've got excellent sun, and I've got virtually no slope. Slope is an issue. I think you can, I'm going to get to this in another slide, but I think you can get away with a little bit of side-to-side slope and a little bit of end-to-end slope by having the tops of your ground posts all at the same height, even as the ground goes down below. And that way, your hoop house itself is level at the top, because I think it probably wants to be. And it certainly would prefer to be not tilted this way, even this way, side to side. That would be a bad idea for the structure. So the ground can slope a little bit, but not the hoop house. How big? Bigger is better. I say that because once you start growing in a hoop house, you'll find all kinds of stuff you really would like room for. Who was a kiwi there? Were you want to plant kiwis? No, there's you were wanting to plant kiwis. Kiwis go like way up or something.
They can go train them however you want, but great.
Okay, all right. And so once you start growing, I think you're going to want to grow a lot of different stuff in there. Also, the larger the spaces inside, the better the temperature buffering. And then I say, caveat, do not count on more than a few degrees of frost protection in winter. Now in fall, if you're growing in a hoop house in, say, October, and it's 28 outside, if you button up your house tight at night, you should be fine. It's still going to get down to low 30s. And I always cover whatever I can cover if it's going to be 28 outside. But in January, if it's 28 outside at night, it's going to be 28 inside at night. You do not have enough incoming solar radiation during the day to get that temperature up high enough to get the soil warm enough to keep it different than ambient during the night. Nights are too long and too cold. Wider is better. The edges really are inefficient growing spaces because you can't get to both sides of them. We'll talk about height on the edge as well. I think 30 by 48 is a good starting size. My 96 house is a lot of room. You can grow a lot of stuff in a 96-foot long house. But then too short really is better than one long. If you have 96 feet to put a house in, maybe build it all as one structure, but figure out a way to divide it. Primarily for cucumbers. If you want to grow cucumbers, you've got a scheme for cucumbers. All right.
So divide it if you're if you need to screen.
Yeah, I don't. Nothing I say here should be taken as a
It's not
command.
eating.
But if I had only one hoop house and it was 96 feet long, and I wanted to grow cucumbers, I would screen one half, put some kind of divider in the middle, maybe just probably just drop plastic down to the middle, maybe even just row cover or something, or screen. So that the other end could be unscreened, which has much better air ventilation. And that's valuable.
Most people growing successfully cucumbers usually got two houses. Because halfway through the season, you're gonna lose. Powdery mildew is gonna wipe out your crop.
Yeah,
But if you have another batch of seedlings already 3 feet high on another part of the farm, then you can just rip that crop out and let the next one go.
Yeah.
So it's definitely good, you know, if you're doing cucumbers, you wanna have 2 separate.
could you introduce yourself? Because now
I
I
was
see. your
trying
name.
not to, because I have one, I work with remote greenhouses, this is, in fact, I think yours are.
The two that are rolling are remote.
Yeah.
I didn't pay him to come and he's not paying me to be here, but I will say, they build an extraordinary product. It's the tank in the sense of snow protection. I'll talk in a minute about trusses and have a word to say about it. Yeah, that's true about cucumbers. It is, I usually lose mine to cucumber beetles before I lose them to powdery mildew.
Well, that's what brings the metal in.
Yeah.
Beetles.
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah, there you go. So Gothic versus Quonset. Now here's one of those places where you can now get hoop vendors. If you're going to do it yourself, you can get a hoop vendor to make a Gothic house, which is cool. Or the do-it-yourself, the major do-yourself ones, you get a half bow Quonset hut. And I say the only choice in snow country. It's not really. I mean, if you had a 40-foot long, 48-foot long Quonset, you could, every time it snows any, depth whatsoever, 6 inches of snow certainly or more, you could go out there and scrape it all down. I do with my Gothics. I go out and scrape the snow off, scrape it off, and the house will be just fine. There's no reason not to. But if you want to go away for a week in the winter, and the weather is sinky, I would not trust a Gothic house, sorry, a Quonset house against a foot of snow, even a light powdery snow, because I just don't know what's going to happen. It's not going to fall off. And the beautiful thing about Gothic is that it will eventually fall off as the inside heats up. It melts the stuff on the top and it comes down the sides. It does build up against the sides, and you have to worry about that a lot. But on a Quonset, from here to here, that snow is just going to stay there. It's not going to slide off. And if you don't come back for a week or so, you might lose a house. You could go inside and put 2x4s under each boat, which is not a bad solution at all. For the works. Okay, and then the different sizes there. I saw somebody who had a 2 and 3, 2.38, 14 gauge. That is a tank. I mean, that's just a lot of steel. I don't think you need to go that big. The small ones that Johnny's selling are almost half that. They're down around that. And there, I think you do have to worry again about slow level. If we were having this talk in Virginia, I would be talking about bow diameter because you can go small. But up here, we really have to worry about that.
That's the Johnny's, that's ours.
Johnny's what?
Yeah, the Bobcat, that's actually our.
Yeah. Oh, is that a remote?
Yeah, and we have not had one collapse yet,
Oh, there you go. A small one.
but yeah, it's very good. Also, the NRCS, which both people, they'll only accept Gothic in real quantity. So,
Right. If you're getting an equip grant,
Yeah.
you need to go Gothic. And then ground post height here. Mine are not extended. By that I mean this. Let's say that this was the ground. My ground posts go up to about here, and then the bows come up with a straight section about like this, and then they start curving, which means that. And now imagine everything I just said is starting at the ground. If I'm walking in my house like this, and I want to work the edge bed from this side, which is a little hard to begin with, I'm going to be like this. If I get an extended ground post that goes up another foot and a half, I can actually stand up and walk down that side. It's a big deal. If you've got 8 beds in your hoop house and 2 of them are sort of not great access, that's a fairly substantial problem for maximizing your financial return. There are other things to do with side beds. You can grow lettuce in them, for instance, and just work the whole thing from the from the accessible side. But still, I think I would go for higher ground posts at this point if I were building. On the other hand, it does raise the interior, the trusses, the thing that you can support your trellising from. You're going to do much more work from a ladder inside, and that's not a great thing. And then parenthetically, when you raise the house, it also means that your peak is going to be another 1.5 to 2 feet higher, and you're going to need a taller ladder than that thing you have hanging around. But yeah. All right. Single wall versus double wall plastic. Somebody was asking about this. All mine are single wall. I had no experience with double wall. The idea with double wall is that you leave the 2 pieces of plastic baggy, and then you blow air into it so it inflates out like this, and you get some extra protection. My understanding is you get an increase from R less than 1.85 to R 1.4, and that ain't much. Now, it's 50% less, but it's going from almost nothing to a little better than almost nothing. Stationary versus mobile. As I say, I had 2 mobiles and a stationary. I was in a workshop at a NOFA conference a few years back. The guy from Cornell, when I told him I had stationary houses, he said, "Are you still moving it?" Because apparently it's, I can tell you it's an issue. It's not. There are houses. I really want to talk to you later. There are houses where you and a friend of yours can just push them right down like this, but I tell you, that's not mine. I get my tractor out, I get my wrenches out, and make it work. And then there's some sources there. Used, I believe, is not equip fundable. I don't think they'll give you money for that. And then do it yourself. You certainly can. You could bend your own thinner hoops. You can go to Home Depot or Lowe's and get chain link fence top rail. Buy one of the bending kits from Johnny's or elsewhere. You can make all the hoops you want and put them up. You're going to have to buy a fair amount of hardware, though, that would be coming with your kit anyway. It's the same hardware, maybe a smaller gauge. I have not done the cost comparison, so I don't know what you're going to saving by doing yourself. Something for sure. I mean, not that you're going to do your own labor and you're going to use some smaller hoops. And then this part I don't get. There are people who advocate for using PVC, electrical conduit, and then covering that with plastic. When I do that, I get very, very quickly a black coating covering on the plastic itself. The PVC apparently outgases chlorine in reaction to plastic. It's terrible with plastic. I really suggest avoiding it, no matter what you may read. Check my folks at home, make sure I haven't got any questions. Okay. This is my 96-foot house without the plastic on it. The various these parts, I'll just point them out. These are the ground posts here. Sorry, folks at home, I hope you figured it out. The bows, obviously, that stuff there. Purlins are these pieces that run down the length. There's also a bridge pole here. The connectors, we'll take a closer look at those. The plastic, obviously. This is the end wall. The roll-up sides are not on here, but that's what goes up here. And then the vents. Here's a look at a bow in cross section. And when I talk about a truss, what I'm talking about is this piece, this piece, this piece, and then completed by the bow, which is continuous. Well, I'm sorry, it's divided here, but it's continuous from here. But this element here is called a truss, and that's where you get your strength from against the snow. Purlins do you no good whatsoever for snow. All they're doing is keeping your hoops from going this way. If you're trying to protect against snow wake, you need trusses. Now, do you need trusses on every bow? No, as long as you keep at it. This house was built by Griffin and it had no trusses whatsoever. I bought a bunch of trusses, but I wanted to cheap out a little bit. And so I put trusses only on every other bow. And it's really been a good house for me. I've never, ever felt as though it was in danger. Except one time, but not from snow, and I'll show you that picture later. So you don't, if, again, especially if you're doing it yourself, or if you're looking at a kit that has bows, trusses every other bow, I think you'll be fine. I would not leave this house for a month, but I would leave it for a week. Anyway, it could stand up. Site prep, as I say, level or very close to it, go side to side. You can even out with the ground post. I really recommend taking a long view. If you're going to grow in it for 10 years or more, level it out. You'll really be glad you did. Because every single season, you'll be dealing with that, you know, in that unevenness in the house. I just think, you know, if you spend $500 to get a guy in with an excavator to give you a nice level surface, I think you'd be happy. Bed prep is easy before raising. Some people say, don't do it because you're going to walk all over it. Yeah, you're going to walk all over it, but so what? You're going to get back in there. You're going to fluff up the soil. You're going to bring in, you know, good stuff. Season after season after season. Do it once after you have after you've raised it. But do your bed prep first, just because it's so easy. And then it gets hard. It really does actually get hard because everything has to go in through the door that you've left. And I had no experience whatsoever bringing a tractor into the hoop house, but I wouldn't do it because I do no-till stuff. Weed control on the outside. If you have, does anyone not know what quackgrass is? Don't be shy. Good, glad to hear. It's the worst stuff in the world. And if you grow in a hoop house and you have quackgrass outside your hoop house, it will get into your hoop house. It's no harder to control inside than outside. But if you have a chance to control it like 10 feet out before you build your hoop house, take advantage of that because it's nasty. There aren't really too many other weeds that will do what that does. So that may be the only one you really worry about. But creeping weeds, you want to worry about. And then perimeter ground insulation, I don't do this, and I'm not even sure I regret not doing it. I was going down a foot, maybe even 2 feet, right where your ground posts are. If this is your ground post plane, right down there, 2 feet down to the ground, or maybe the way that I understand it's done in some other places, out not nearly as far, sorry, not down nearly as far, but out a couple of feet. It does a beautiful thing, which is that it insulates the inside soil from the outside cold weather and cold runoff. And that's a really nice thing. And especially if you're going to be doing winter growing, if what you're after is deep season extension, your edge beds are really going to take it on the chin from cold weather. You can get started with them a lot sooner if you're insulated. Yeah.
Could you talk a little more about that, about the type of insulation, drainage issues?
I've almost told you everything I know, but I will say that the way that I understand that it's done is with a rigid insulation, either polyurethane or EPS, expanded polystyrene, something that is going to last a long time in the soil, and not that easy to do before you put your stuff in, but you'd be digging a trench, a very, very narrow trench, putting it down at ground level. You could come up a little bit above your post, which would be really cool because you don't need the sunlight coming in there. You get absolutely no benefit whatsoever, probably from the bottom 6 inches of your plastic. You might as well cover it with insulation as well as yours. It does, you know, it gets knocked around a little bit during the course of the house. As far as drainage goes, that's a good question. I actually haven't talked about this. when I say level, a couple inches over the course of 30, 40 feet would actually be nice for that. But if your soil is really well drained, don't worry about it. I actually don't worry about it on my hoop houses. The two that are the rolling tunnels are on the most beautiful sand you've ever seen, and the water just disappears. If you're on clay, then yeah, I would pitch it to the end of the house, probably a couple inches over the course. Do you guys have a recommendation for how much to pitch?
For the structure itself, I want to see it perfectly level.
Yeah.
I don't like to see even 2 inches difference, mostly because the bottom of the roll bar, you want that to be level. If it's cockeyed, your roll bar is not going to fit right.
Yeah. You'll know what that means in a minute.
But as far as everything else, I like to see it pitch away from the greenhouse no matter what. You're gonna get, on a 30-foot wide house, you get 1 inch of rain, you're actually getting 15 feet of that 1 inch of rain next to your
Because the
greenhouse.
house is 15
Because
feet
it's
wide.
all
you get a
going
whole
off the side, so you're gonna get a lot of water over there. You gotta have a place where it can go,
Yeah.
but most people don't put drainage in. And they just let it naturally.
Yeah.
And if you're doing no-till, you're gonna have really good soil that's gonna absorb that water really well.
So on the north side of my stationary house, I have a slope coming down like this, and then it's dug out. It's about 6 feet wide, and then the house starts. It's a terrible site I mean, that part of it is a terrible site. It's great for the reason. And I do get a little bit of water here. But it's pretty sandy, and so it'll go down through. I would worry about it if you've got clay. I would worry about that, especially if you can't pitch it off in this direction, pitch it in that direction just to get it out of it. Did I say for snow, not only 15 feet because you just want to blow it away, but even if you don't have 15 feet, you want 6 or 7 or 8 level, because you're going to get snow build up there. You're going to want to take multiple passes with your snow blower. And if you are doing what I'm doing through this narrow little thing, it's awful. Don't do it. You'll curse it every time. All right. Couple thoughts on construction. We're still in pretty good time, but I'm going to move on here. You can build it yourself, and you can build it solo if that's what you want to do. If you have friends, lucky you. But just about everything you actually can do yourself. In fact, that 96-foot house I put up myself on this, every piece of it. It's actually really hard with a rolling house to get that first bow up. It's supposed to go like that. But once the first one's up and somebody holds it in place for you and you attach it to something, you can go from there, even with a rolling house. It's a simple process. It really is. It's akin to take the choice. And hoop houses in general are very forgiving of small imperfections. If you say to yourself, oh my God, I didn't do things right. This is actually a great start, because you can be a half an inch here or an inch here, and it's just not. And there's lots of free advice available from me, from other people. A lot of people have these at this point, and they will happy to talk to you. Construction sequence, you do your layout. You drive your ground post, you raise your bows, you attach your ridge poles and purlins to get it, you get this wobble out of it. You attach your trusses. Now, and I say that there are other, when I built mine, you guys said, put the bows up and then put the trusses on. I don't know why I didn't put them together on the ground. I don't know if I'm following your
That's
instructions.
what you're asking.
Yeah, okay, so you can loosely do your trusses on the ground. It will save you some time. But I would say do not tighten them up, because that rigidifies this structure, and you may want a little bit of wiggle to get it into your ground post. Even in fact, if it's perfect spot on, you want some wiggle, because you've got this thing that weighs 80 pounds or so up in the air that's going like this. And I'd rather have a little bit of wiggle down here just to be able to put it where it belongs. Attach your baseboards and your hip points, you build your end walls, cover with plastic, and then install your roll-up bars and your ropes. And we'll talk about each of those as we go. And then pat them down. Construction tools, very simple tools. Do invest in a good, powerful cordless drill, 18 volt, 20 volt, because you will just use it all the time for everything. You want to avoid drilling into your frame as much as you possibly can because it weakens the bones. But there are plenty of places where you have to do it. And when you have to do it, I'll talk about tech screws in a minute, which are these self-tapping screws. I really have found that a cobalt drill bit to drill a pilot hole into that metal before I try to put my tech screws in is the difference between having lunch and not having lunch. Because it just takes forever to do those tech screws. If you hit a particular hard spot on that metal, you go through 3 or 4 screws trying to get rid of it. It's awful. Wrenches, socket driver, nothing fancy, nothing bizarre, just some standard tools. A metal cutting tool, there are places where you have to cut through a purlin or a ridgepole. Sledgehammer for driving in the ground post, a couple of levels, and a plumb bob. By the way, I should say, I'd be happy to send this presentation to anybody who wants it as a PDF. I'll send you my email at the end. A plumb bob, because you want those when you're attaching your purlins to your bows, you want that bow to be plumb. And so if you drop a plumb bob, you can do pretty well with that. You could use a level one as well. That's nice of the at least one tall step ladder, you have to be able to work comfortably up at the peak. You don't have to stand and look over the peak like this, but you do have to be up here. In other words, you have to stand on the ladder so that you can be here, not here, but you've got work to do up here. And then a short step ladder. And by the way, not an extension ladder. You do not want to lay a ladder against your structure while you're building it. You cannot get it where it belongs if you're pushing against it like that. To do layouts, very simple. If you've never done a square layout before, you're simply trying to equalize these two lengths. So I would take a couple pieces of rebar, a couple of wooden stakes or something like that, and measure it. You're doing, say, a 48-foot house. Get that at 48, come over here to your distance. Let's say that's 30, get 48 here. Only the luckiest people in the world will just be square at that point. Instead, it'll be like this, but that will mean that these two lines are different. What you want to do is just take those stakes and adjust them until those are exactly the same. And these are still the 30 or whatever the width is. At that point, you've got square corners. Now, with one person, this will take 3 or 4 hours because, believe me, every time you move something, it's just a little different. And then you got to walk from this end to that end, and then from this end to that end, and so you have a tape measure each time. And it's so much easier to do. It'll take you less than half the time, probably take an hour to lay that out. And if you have 4 people, 1 on each end of the 2 tape measures, well, you could probably do that 20. It's not hard. It's just hard to work. How important is careful layout? I think the answer is a couple inches, right? If you end up with a 30-foot 2-inch house, you're going to tell me I'm wrong here.
No, I'm completely agreeing.
Yeah, you're going to be fine. And what you don't want, though, and this won't come in at this process, will come later. What you don't want is for these two widths to be different, because at that point, say this one is wider than this one. At that point, the plastic is really tight on this bow, and then it's loose on this bow. That you don't want. But whether the thing is 30 feet or 30 feet 2 inches or 29 feet 10 inches, it's not going to matter very much to the structure and how the structure holds together and how you build it. It might matter a little, and you should try as hard as you can. And then shorter, a couple inches shorter is better than a couple inches long. If you're at the end of a really hard day and you say, can I get this damn thing perfect? And you're at 47 feet 11 inches, I would say build it. And the reason is that your purlins which are gonna run this, you can always cut them an inch short, but they might come in your kit exactly the right length, and you do not want to be an inch lower because it just won't work. You can get an extension, figure out how to do it, but anyway, that's sort of my. Ground posts, everybody must do this. Rimmel does this. They supply a little piece of wood. It's just the most brilliant, simple tool in the world. You still do this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's got two, that's actually, this one shows four, but it's got at least two indentations in it, exactly 4 feet apart. As soon as the first one's in the ground, you just put that up against it and it tells you exactly where to put the next one. Very nice. But check it, by the time you get to the end, you may find that you've gone an extra couple of inches. Don't do that. And I think it is a good idea while you're laying out, at least for starters, to do that with a positioning jig and stakes, not bam, ground posts all the way down, because you could get to the end of your house and say, oh, shoot. Whereas with stakes, you can remeasure it and see whether you really did get it all the way. Sledgehammer, the post pounder comes with the kit. This is what happens when you don't use the post pounder. Never, ever, ever attack your frame without a post pounder. This is a ground post coming up. As I say, I don't know what the other companies do, but this is from Griffin. They have a full width bow and a full width ground post that meet but do not slide one into the other. Instead, there's a narrower piece of metal in there that then gets bolted through those two posts. It's a perfectly good way. It's a great way to hold your frame together. I say watch the bolt hole alignment. If you've got bolts that are going to be attaching these two, you don't want that bolt hole to be like that on your ground post, and then have your frame come down with a bolt hole like this. They just don't line up. This thing could spin around, and if you're, a little bit off of it, you stick a piece of rebar or a long narrow bolt through it, and do that with it to make it straight. Works. Yeah.
How long did it take you to put it up?
To put this frame up,
This is the 96,
that's a good question. The 96-foot frame.
like weeks or?
Yeah, so all of the work I don't know the answer to that question, but all of the work put together from level ground with all the pieces in place, level ground to where everything was up, I would guess that's probably a week, maybe 10 days for one person. I think 2 people could do it in half that. And if you
For like
have-
40 hours.
yeah, 40-hour weeks, right? I mean, that's probably about it.
I talk to people all the time. Typically, you're looking at about, for a 30 by 96, about 100 man hours. So 2 guys could do it in a full week. But a lot of that, an awful lot of that is based on manufacturer. Because some manufacturers do things for you, some don't. For instance, all of our purlin, there's absolutely no drilling. Everything comes pre-cut and pre-drilled. So you don't have to drill anything. So it makes life a lot simpler, especially if it's your first one. You just, it is an erector set.
Yeah.
If you put it to it. But I would figure 2 people that reasonably handy people can do it in 100 hours comfortably. First time.
And in fact, that's a nice figure, because now I will say, if you're doing it solo, that same amount of work is not 100 hours, it's probably 150 hours. Because there's a fair number of places where you put a purlin up in the air, and then you walk it, and then you bring it up here, and then you do this, and then you got to go to this end here. Whereas with 2 people, you're going to save some time there. It's nice.
You can hire a company to do it, typically it's about half the price of the iPhone. So if you bought it from me for 10,000, probably cost you 5,000 to pay per month.
Okay.
Very rough numbers.
And that's, in fact, knowing that they're high prices, that's why I put on there. You really can do this yourself. It just isn't funny. It's, it's nice to be handy, and it's good to get a lot of advice, but this is not This is not, I would never, well, I did build my own house. There are many things about my house I would not have done myself. That's not this by a long shot. I would probably build a garage by myself now, just for fun. But that's not this by a long shot. A doghouse, you can build a doghouse by yourself. Absolutely, and you can build one of these. Concrete footings, you don't need concrete footings unless you're in really, really rocky soil and you just can't get those posts down. I'm not in that soil. I don't have that experience. I will say, and I'm kind of interested in your thought on this. I have ground posts obviously every bow on my 96-foot house. On my movable house, I might have started with ground posts on everyone, but I don't attach it on everyone. And those have made it through some really significant winds. A ground post on every bow that's 2 feet down, that's a lot of attachment to this one. And if 1 or 2 or 5 of them over the whole course of the house don't make it down and you have to cut them off, you're not compromising the integrity of the house. Do you think that's a fair statement?
Yeah, the only ones I would make sure is the corners, just, you know, and then if you have to snap with it.
And that's a nice point. The corner ones, as I will tell you about another house I had a disaster with, the corner ones take a lot more of the wind load than any of the middle ones do, just because they're right there. Take it on a chair. Okay. Bows and trusses, bows should be plugged. Yeah.
Here's some question. I was thinking that come up in the chat.
Bless you. Wait, who's, but I don't see.
It's at the bottom. You see chat at the bottom?
Oh, is it in the, oh, is it a chat question? Oh, what's the name? They want to know your name.
James,
James?
Rimmel Greenhouse, yeah.
James at Rimmel Greenhouses. Thank you for the question. All right. Yeah. Actually, we can leave that out. None of them I actually see the next one comes. Bows should be plumbed. That starts with the ground post. Make sure these ground posts are plumbed. That's a really important part of assembly, is making sure they go in plumb. You can a little bit, but you really don't want to. You really want to make sure they're going plumb. I said minimize, avoid penetrating the bows. It just weakens the bows, and we'll talk about connectors in a minute. You just don't need to. I talked about that. Tools, wrenches. There you go. Raise the first one, placing it, the first bow goes up in the air. You can get up in the air if you just brace the feet of it and then just put a rope on it and then just really, really hard like this. You know, I should get it up in the air. Just make sure it doesn't go over on top if you want to do it. And then if you can get that first bow foot into the ground post, everything is easy. Because that's going to keep it burdened. You're going to have stop and have a cup of tea and brush with some, put that in ground. And then the next one, what I do is up at the top, and if I'm smart, I have done all this before I put the damn thing up. I string a rope up through I hang a little pulley or even just a little, they're called brace bands. I wonder if I have a picture of one somewhere. It's just a little piece of metal that goes around and clamps. But it's, anyway, it hangs like a hole like this. I put a rope through it and then tie that rope to the next one I want to raise. And then, so the rope's going up here to the state. I do it this way, don't I? Anyway, the rope goes through there. I pull on that, pull on the pulley, the pull thing comes up in the air. And I got the next one up in the air and I put it down and just go all the way down. It works really well. Purlins, ridge poles, these are called cross connectors. They are a piece of engineering brilliance. They keep the bow and the purlin tight together without penetrating either one. It's something to look for, I would say, just because otherwise you're going to be drilling into that, and there's no reason. This is a wind brace, runs from one, makes a new diagonal. I don't have any wind braces in my stationary house. I've never seen that it matters. I do have wind braces in the rolling house, and it's really a good idea for those, just because they have they're more dynamic structures, with less attachment to the ground, and it's nice for that. Having said that, one of my rolling houses has it now a distinct lean. I can't remember why it has a distinct lean, but it's had that lean for 5 or 6 years. Doesn't seem to be hurting me, so I pay no attention to it. It may have some implications for how it gets covered, but there's always a little slop on the amount of plastic you have, so it's not a big deal. Baseboards and hip boards. These are baseboards, these are hip boards. Baseboards, they're not needed for stability. They are not, they don't provide any stability essentially whatsoever because the ground is doing all that for you. Therefore, you can do whatever makes sense for you. You're not trying to beef that up down there for the stability of the house. Now, I use a double wiggle wire channel, and that's what's shown in these pictures here. This is the double channel. It's just an aluminum extrusion. It's got 2 spaces for wiggle wire. It makes a nice baseboard. The bottom of it, you can't see it here, and I haven't put it in here, but from the bottom channel down to the ground, I run about 2 feet of plastic. This is about a 6-inch space, and so I have some plastic go out. So I get an air seal along the bottom. And then the top one, I either don't use or I use for attaching deer fencing or cucumber beetle exclusion. So it makes a very nice exclusion. It makes a very nice place to attach those things. And then on the upper one, which is also a double channel, the plastic comes up and over, and I'll attach the plastic to the top channel here, leave the bottom one open, either holding nothing or again holding the cute screen or the deer fence. So it provides a really nice thing. You might be tempted, well, I'm never going to grow cucumbers. You might be tempted to substitute this for a single one. I don't think that's strong enough. I don't think you want to do that. I don't think you have enough resistance to distortion for your roll-up sides. We'll talk about roll-up sides in just a second. Whoops. And walls. You could do anything you want. No, as far as I know, no hoophouse company will send you their design for endwalls. You should decide what you want. You can build them really simple. You can build them like you're building a house. These are mine. That's in yellow because it's advanced. We'll talk in a second, but that's about 6 feet. That's about 3 feet. That's about 12. I divided it after a while into 2 6s again, 3 and 6. I do recommend when you design your end, a couple of things. First of all, design it before you put up your first hoop, before you put up your first bow. Because in order to build that end wall, you have to have these connectors. And that connector has to go under the wiggle wire channel and the wiggle wire channel that goes on the end nodes. So you have to know where you want your wall dividers to be before you build that, before you put up that first hoop. This has to be in place. In any event, I built this originally thinking I'm going to roll this up, and it's still a good idea. I really should do it. 12 feet wide, roll it up, much more ventilation. I just never got around to doing it. And in the meantime, this 12-foot wide piece of plastic, every time we get wind, it was way too much expanse without any support. And I could tell because it was, tearing suspenders. So I put in a divider, and I think 6s. I can go 6s. I think you go 4, which is just great. But you can do whatever you want. Really important though, when you design this, make sure you know how to get in and out. I think 3 feet is an absolute minimum. I would never put a door on any narrower than that because I want to walk through with my wheelbarrow. The wheelbarrow is probably 2.5, and I want to be able to walk through at an angle So I don't have to go straight into whatever that is and then take a turn. I want to be able to cross like that. So I think 3 feet is minimum. Wider is a little bit nicer and then peak fence, as I say, they're not as effective as you might expect. They're not really moving much air in a really long house. They're not moving much air at all because the force from one end to the other end to push almost 100 feet of air just isn't there. On a shorter house, they'll do a lot more. But most of your ventilation is going to come side to side with the roll ups. Doors, if you priced out hoop houses, you have seen doors are just ridiculously expensive. For what's 3 by 6, 18 square feet on a house that has thousands of square feet of wall on it. The thing is, they're just really expensive. I thought, well, I'm gonna eventually buy doors, but in the meantime, I'm gonna do this, which is just a sheet of plastic held in place on one side with wiggle wire that I just take on and take off every time I want to go through. It's not nearly as bad as it sounds. It actually works pretty well. You can tack it up out of the way so you can move in and out with it. You take it down and spin it up. I'm not recommending it, but if you're trying to save some money in your house, it's not a bad place to save money. But there are, people will sell you, and I've really, I lost that for these doors, which are sliding doors inside the house. So inside that first bow, there's a strong support here, and you hang a sliding door on it. The nice thing is you don't have to open it in, which cuts down your growing area. You don't have to open it out, so you don't have to get the snow out of the way before you go in. Slide it across. It's the Cadillac, but it also costs. It costs $2,000. Maybe I'm exaggerating. But anyway, they're expensive. But you can do whatever you want. But do design your end walls before you start going. Plastic goes on 6 mil is standard, absolute standard. You should not buy anything else, even if somebody thinks you should. 4-year, it begins, you can see in this left-hand picture, this is newer plastic, this is older plastic. This has probably been on 6 years. It does get cloudy over time. Still translucent, but it will cut down the amount of light that gets through. And that's, you really want to maximize your light. So replacing every 4 years. Plastic comes with different kinds of coatings or no coating at all. Most of my growing has been with no coating at all. I bought an infrared one once. I did not see the difference that I should have, but maybe that's me. As you're planning out your purchase, you want to roll. Standard is 100 feet. And so if you've got a 96-foot long house, you're fine. That's a great piece of plastic to go over the end of your house. And then you just buy a different roll for your end walls. If you've got a shorter house, then you can play one against the other. You need to know this height, with the whole thing. You got to figure out how that's going to work. But it's just a matter of laying out your squares and figure out where it's all going to go. As you plan your end wall plastic, I would not try the calculation of, oh, but I cut it off here, so maybe I could use a short piece here and a longer piece here, and use real nice scraps and save me $15 on the purchase of the plastic. Don't do it. It's just way too much mess to try to do that. Instead, I would calculate this piece as the whole height and the whole width. I have a lot of these plastic triangles at my farm. They're useless. I found nothing to do with them whatsoever. So it goes. Okay. And then that plastic gets attached to single wiggle wire channel, which runs up here on the end bows. And here's an interesting question. Should you run that single wiggle wire channel down here? And that, so this side rolls up, and we'll talk about roll up sides more in just a couple slides. This side rolls up. So during the summer, it could not be, would not be, should not be attached with wiggle wire. But during the winter, you could close that up and get a really nice tight seal on your house. I did that for a few years, and it's a really nice tight seal on your house. The problem is, when you attach and unattach and attach and unattach little wire, time after time, it breaks the plastic. It makes little nicks in it. Those little nicks become bigger nicks, and essentially, eventually, over time, what happens is that this sidewall piece of plastic becomes shorter than the sidewall itself, because part of it has just been cut off by the little wire. And that's not good. There are ways to mitigate that, but I'm not sure in the long run, it was a great idea to do. Anyway, so that's that. Yeah. Wiggle wire, if you've never seen it before, it's just a stainless steel zigzag wire. It goes into the channel. It's fun to play with. You'll start to like it. Except when you get to the very ends, and when you try to put the very ends in, you'll get pokes in your fingers and it's nasty. So use a pair of pliers for that. I have tried cutting with electrician's pliers. Generally, it's not going to work. A cheap pair of bolt cutters will work pretty well. And then, you know, over time, as you replace the plastic, you pull that little wire back out. Instead of being 4 feet long, it's probably going to be 4 feet 2 or 3 inches just from that stretching that you did and pointed out. That's not a problem. You can just keep using it. It doesn't get significantly narrower, which would be a problem. Here's where you can have so much fun and then have a disaster. The disaster, hello,
Almost done.
are you here for erecting hoop houses?
Yeah.
Oh, come in, have a seat. Hey, where are you trying?
I have one too.
I'll finish the sentence, I'll see what. Anyway, you can have so much fun with this because it's an extraordinary feeling of accomplishment. To get a piece of plastic on your hoop house, to get it really nice and tight, all by yourself. It's really great. I mean, I do recommend it. But if the wind comes up before you finish, it can just play havoc. And you really have to be careful about that. That's why you start early before sunrise. You lay your plastic out, take a tennis ball, put some plastic over it, wrap it up tight with a piece of rope now over that. Throw that rope over the house, and depending how long your house is, 2 or 4, 5 places. So that now on the other side of the house, you can yank on that rope to pull it up. Get a push broom, because from the inside of the house, you're going to want to be able to push that plastic up over any obstruction that might meet. Throw your ropes over, start pulling down the line, pull it up, pull it over, pull it up, pull it over, tie it off so it doesn't slide back down, and then start tacking in place with your wiggle wire. You've got channel here, you tack it all the way down, you've got channel up here, tack it all the way down. And once you have it tacked in all those places, you're fine. Have a cup of tea. It's not going to go anywhere. Even if the wind comes up, it will like this, but it actually won't fly away. And then what you want to do is pull it down, and the goal is drawn tight. On a cold one, drawn tight. I say tack sparingly just because you will nick a little bit, but as you go, you really want to just take the thing out, pull it down, tack it down, pull it down, move along, tack it down. And I had thought foolishly that if I stood up on the end and pulled the plastic on my 96-foot house, I'd get it tight. Not going to happen. There's too much weight, too much inertia to do the whole job from here. Instead, down here on both sides, that's really where you're going to get it tight. So just work on that and just keep working on it. It took me a few hours over a couple of days to really get it where it should be. But I finally got it where it should be, and I like that a lot.
Quick
Yes,
question on that. You could go back to. the-
yeah, sure.
You're recommending to install the end wall plastic first.
So
So basically construct your end walls prior to installing the.
Yeah. that's right.
last layers of plastic.
In fact, I think we can do this. Yeah, that's like, oh, that slide right, whoops.
Right, as an example.
Yeah, that slide right there. Yeah,
No,
yeah, wrong one, right? Yeah, so I put all the end wall plastic that matters, I put in first, none that matters, in other words, is attached to that wiggle wire there. Well, that's why you need wiggle
And
wire
if you're
channel down here
framing-
anyway.
If
if
you're
you're on-
framing an end wall in any sort of, you know, structural capacity, you gotta do all that first.
Yeah, you don't, it doesn't have to be your final thing, but it does have to have the plastic that attaches to here. Now, you can attach that plastic second on top of your beige piece of plastic, and then you wouldn't have to put in that plastic first. But then, first of all, you already got the end wall design. You might as well go ahead and put plastic in, but second of all, it means that your end wall plastic would have to come off in order to replace the main plastic. And I've cheaped out a couple of times, not replacing my end wall plastic and just replacing the foam plastic.
And why would you use plastic? Why not use, say, like some sort of rigid poly on the ends?
Oh, you can, yeah, it's both sides.
Right.
Yeah, no, you absolutely can. I have no experience with it. It comes with a separate kind of extrusion to put here so that the polycarbonate comes up and sits in it. And I should say, you could build an entire polycarbonate house, but no experience whatsoever in that sort of the other scope here. But yeah, end walls made of polycarbonate are fairly common. They last a long time. They went through a lot of life. They're a little better insulation. Anyway, so that's it. I only encourage you to do by yourself because it's fun. It's have a couple friends. It works better. But anyway, if you want to do it by yourself, you can. Roll up sides and skirts. So these sides, this piece of plastic is continuous with the thing that came down off the roof, but it has a separate function in life. It's wiggle wired in up here. It's wrapped around and attached to a permanent-like object on the bottom, a roll bar, and it gets a crank on one end, and that crank, here's the simple crank, or it can be a geared crank, and that crank is used to roll up the sides, and then not shown, you actually need a piece of pipe to stick that crank into, so it doesn't just go like that, so it stays put. Amazingly, you can do amazingly, you can roll up a 96-foot long house. You can roll up a 96-foot house by hand without one of these geared cranks. But after 8 years of doing that, it's really gets old. It gets old in about a minute. Actually, it's a lot of this. So you get one of these geared cranks. It's just the easiest thing, because it's 5 to 1, so 5 of your turns turns into one turn, and it works really nice. But a 48-foot house, it's not that handy, and you're done. So I would, the cranks cost, I don't know, $80 or something like that. You don't need them for shoulder houses. Okay. Wind and snow. So here's one of my disasters. That picture on the right is my 96-foot house after a wicked windstorm a couple of years ago in March. What happened should never happen to you. And this is completely my own fault. This is not a design fault. This is not a construction fault. What happened was the top piece of plastic served me well for a couple of years, but it developed an opening along a fold. And I should have at that point said, no way, I'm getting my money back from the supplier. This should never have happened, but I didn't. I said, well, I'm a year away from replacing it. It's fine. Rain kind of comes down and goes through, but And that slice in it got bigger over time. And over the winter, I said, really gonna have to replace this spring, aren't I? Because it was just starting to become untenable. And that slice was probably right about here. And it could only be about 12 feet long. And I tried patching it and attaching it to a thin board here and a thin board, attaching those two boards together. And it just didn't work. And then we had this particular, and this is what happened. The only lesson is don't cheap out. Do not let your plastic degrade to the point at which the wind can get inside and it's not supported at one end because it just becomes a sail. And the house stayed put, but as you can see, this I think is the roll bar from the other side of the house. And the whole thing came off, and it's just a disaster. It's one of those things you want and say, why am I in this business? And I'm in this business to get smarter, and I got smarter. That's why I say drum tight, just so that the plastic does not do this all the time, because over time you'll get little holes. There's no grain in it. It's not going to go into some big long rip, but you will get little holes just from the plastic back and forth. And then close up tight for big winds at both ends of the houses with the vent. You don't want the air getting inside because that's really when you start to get some problems. Okay, we mentioned about snow already, and you do need a snow blower if you're going to any investment whatsoever in a house that's more than 15 feet long. Because shoveling it by hand, it's not that first snow. It's the one after that, the one after that. You're just going to say, yeah, that's fine. And then you get an ice storm on top of it, and then you've got maybe an hour to get it before it collapses. You don't want that. You are just about the pest exclusion. We got a couple more slides here. Pest exclusion. I talked before about the insect screen. This is the stuff. It's called Protect netting. Goes into the wiggle wire channel. It works real well. Kind of delicate. Only lasts for a couple of years. You'll get little holes in it. You can use packing tape to cover those holes, but eventually it's like a nylon stocking. It'll just keep going. And then even if you don't do this, I really recommend almost anywhere putting deer fencing. In fact, I go with a smaller one than that to help keep rats out. Deer fencing to keep deer out. I've had deer in my house and certainly rabbits and woodchucks. And if you exclude it from the moment you build it, it just goes off their radar. Whereas if they start to learn there's food inside, it takes a lot longer to keep them from getting curious. There was one year before I put this up, I was growing nice early cherry tomatoes. And I would walk the aisles every morning and say, well, those will be ready in a couple of days. I never got cherry tomatoes. And I couldn't figure out why. It's because the deer were coming in and eating all the nice little cherry tomatoes.
I had a woodchuck get in mine. In 2 days, he ate about $3,000.
Yeah. So if you can keep them out, if you've got pests in your garden, this is a reason all by itself to have a hoop house. Just keep them out, and then you can grow food. I've had a couple that are burrowed under the side, so that the one entrance is outside, the other entrance is inside. We got. Last couple slides here on mobile houses, but I want to stop because if there are other questions that have come up, I'm happy to take them. I will talk about mobile houses, but if there are other questions. Yeah, that's
Roughly, how much are you spending every 4 years to replace your plastic and netting?
price of 196.
Some about. From that 30 by 96. But I think it's like $700 or $800.
Yeah.
And if you do double layers.
It feels like it produces so much plastic waste. It is a version of plastic every 4 years.
Yeah.
Is it there? I've seen like the corrugated plastic, but that would create more of a milkiness than the block out outside.
So there is a product I know nothing about, maybe you know something about it, which is a solar something or other that actually diffuses light. It's, you can't look up and see the sun, but it's supposed to be great. You know anything about it?
Most people, most commercial farmers do not use it.
I'm so glad to hear that,
It's,
because I felt badly for that.
Because if the greenhouse racks, like you said, you move a little bit, if it racks a little bit and all the bows move, all the channels that hold that plastic in move.
Yeah.
And you have seen every.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah, that's a good point, is that these alternate coverings require wiggle wire down each of the bows rather than over the whole one.
But if you do like you're saying, polycarbonate, it's great, but you're doubling the cost of your greenhouse. So it goes from a $20,000 greenhouse to a $40,000.
So as far as go ahead.
Well, the poly is recyclable,
Oh,
and there are places that will
so
take
we
it.
get-
Yeah. So,
Right, and in fact, it's usable. I actually use mine for a number of different things, primarily for tarps. Because it's tough as nails, and unlike the blue woven tarps, it doesn't rip. And it lasts forever. Now, I've done 2 replacements and I have a pile that's broken. So I'll have to find a place to recycle it because I'm about to do it. Other question?
I had a question about snow. You mentioned that it melts and slides off.
Yeah.
Are there times when it piles up and you have to get up there with something?
So I never get up there. I don't know if you saw, I went by too quickly on the snow one. There was a little picture of a snow broom, which is the thing you can buy. You get a long extension handle, get one of those nice foam heads, and you stand on the bottom and you do this, and boy, these muscles got a good workout. Yeah, no, you never have to get up, and you'll see people suggesting like throw a rope over or something like that with a knot in it. It's not like terrible idea, but people damage the plastic over time. No, the snow brooms work really well. The other thing though to keep in mind is, yes, the snow will slide, and it may take a couple of days to slide, but it's going to build up on the sides. And if you wait those couple of days for it to slide and build, it's going to get thicker and thicker. And I don't know if you snowblowed much, but when you get old snow that has moved from one place down to another place, it's kind of like concrete. And so I really recommend moving it away just as quickly as you can. I used to go out in the first winter, I went out in the middle of the night. First winter I had these rolling thunders, I went out in the middle of the night, and I was just definitely afraid something could happen to the house. That doesn't happen, but you do want to move the snow as quickly as you can. Okay, mobile houses. This is not mine, this is from Kentucky, I think, but the idea is you've got growing happening during the summer, you put some fall crops outside, and then as these guys peter out in early October, mid-October, you say goodbye to them, you move the house down onto this spot here, and you carry these through the winter. And then the next spring, you plant your summer crops inside here, and then do the same thing, plant outdoor crops here, and then as these guys peter out, move it back.
But you have to have a tractor.
No, you don't
Would a
actually.
good lawnmower?
No. So, so there are different ways. I'll actually talk about moving on the next slide, but here's one reason why mobile houses are cool. You can do your annual bed prep outside rather than inside. It's not a reason to have a mobile house, but it's a really nice benefit. As I say, it requires discipline. The timing to really maximize that benefit is pretty tight. You're going to get your outdoor crops started at the right time so that you can harvest them in October, November. So here that is again, just inside you. You've got your summer crops here, you got your cold hardy crops here. This goes over here, your cold hardy crops. Then you plant your summer crops when that's the thing. You don't need a tractor, actually. Up until this year, when I bought a tractor, I was doing it with hand winches. Those hand winches attached to a couple of sturdy blocks of wood, and that sturdy block of wood banged in through a hole in it, banged into the ground, so that it didn't move while it started to pull the house. It works pretty well. It's easy, but it works pretty well. But if you have a tractor, you have 2 tractors. One tractor, I did mine with one tractor. I'm not sure I'll repeat that because the wires come this way to the tractor, and then the tractor goes this way, and then forces involved, better than 2 tractors. Anyway, I think that's my last slide. Oops.
Question on the mobile
Yeah,
units, so you're creating a track, or you're not, you have a track that's permanent, and you.
oh yeah, so, sorry. That's what I should have been pointing out on that last slide. So here you can see, this is the bow, it's got a wheel at the bottom of it. It's running on a pipe track, that track is just sitting on the ground.
Okay, it's not, that's not. Mounted in some way to some sort of footing or anything.
No, no, it's just sitting there, it's just, inertia is holding it in place. And then, because the bows are not attached to ground posts, you have to run attachments to ground posts, and those are a pain, by the way. If you decide to get into mobile housing, do consider well what to do with those ground posts, because they're a problem to work around. They really chew up your side beds. But
We've upgraded that option. Now it's a screw anchor.
a screw
And
it,
it's chain.
that, which is nice. And then there's one company, I forget the name, that actually attaches it to the rail and has the rail attached to the ground permanently, which is kind of cool. I forget what they're called. But
You're just taking that off, move it, attach it to a second set of ground posts.
exactly right. And that second set of ground posts and the rail are permanent in both positions.
Which could cause. You can't, you have an obstacle now. Which basically, I mean, just.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's, I do mostly transplanting rather than seeding with a machine. If I was seeding that row with a machine, yeah, it would be in the way. And it's, it's a weed magnet because it's really hard to do careful weeding all around, and you got this thing coming here. But, it's worth it. It's still worth it. I really like growing in them. And I should be better at it, but that's the way it goes. I think that's it. As I say, email me for a PDF if you like. Happy to send you this. If you're not staying for the next part of this, which is growing the hoop houses, I'd be happy to send you that one as well, or even if you are staying for it. By the way, shameless promotion, I do have an auction item in the silent auction. I'm happy to consult. And if you're not a member of Milton House, please join. Patronize our exhibitors and our sponsors. Also the bulk order that's coming up. Milton House bulk order. You can find details about that on the website. If you don't know the bulk
You
order.
wouldn't go 5 miles west of looking at it.
Oh, yeah, so
Stretch.
did I say west?
You said anywhere east.
Yeah, because I need to Connecticut.
I know, but I'm like,
Wait, where's it? Say?
it's at the bottom.
Anywhere east of the Connecticut River. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, you wouldn't stretch that.
Oh, you mean just to the other side of the Connecticut? I might, if the bid is right, yeah. I don't want to go to, I mean, I would love to go to Pittsfield.
No,
But
not
I'll probably pass on, but, yeah.
What's that?
Northampton. I mean,
Oh, absolutely, Northampton, I would go on a day, yeah.
why you want.
I'm starting a farm on leased land in a temporary space. How feasible, that is a really good question. How feasible is taking down a hoop house and moving to another site? It is possible, and you will hate every moment. I took down my 96-foot house from the site where it was, back in the old days before, there was a Craigslist. You could actually find used hoop houses pretty easily because people had them and they didn't know how to get rid of them. I took it down. I enjoyed the challenge. I would not want to do it again. I would not want to do this unless I had at least a few years guarantee of that hoop house erected, and I would never do it year after year. It's just find a different system, I would say, for
Your hoop house is collapsible, you can't go tunnel.
collapsible.
The Bobcat is probably the closest you're gonna find.
Yeah.
Any of the caterpillar tunnels you find out there, they're not gonna last up there.
Yeah.
The bobcat will, because it's just a small greenhouse. There's no difference, but if it's made down the south, I would look closely at it. But yeah, bobcat, that's only got one purlin. It's a lot easier to take it apart and move it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't move one.
Getting the ground hose out is actually. really a pain. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you could do it with a company to knock it off. A hijack lift or something like that. It's kind of a pain.
And then they'll be all rusty.
Yeah, and then all this.
Dirt.
If I had to do this move, if I wanted to grow in protected culture and I didn't know how long I had, I would probably go with a Caterpillar type tunnel, which is, hoops, plastic, rope, holding the whole thing down and not meant to go through the wind. And then I think I would take it down during the winter, anyway, and then just put it up in the spring. And that's a really good way to get all in November. Might get part of December, but you might decide to hang it up. You don't get January, might get a little bit February, but you get all of March, you get a lot of benefits from that. And if you have to move it, it's so much nicer than taking this whole thing apart. Because there's a lot of, there must be 1,000 screws, bolts and both of those.
What's the ballpark cost for a caterpillar?
Our bobcat,
Like not a bobcat, but a caterpillar that you take down and.
I would, if it were, you're probably not gonna like this, but if I was gonna just go on the cheap, I would just go buy some conduit at Home Depot. And the plastic conduit and just bend them on rebar and,
Yeah,
but you're planning on throwing it away in 2 or 3 years. Gaining ground, which is a big, they have a really good program locally. They had, I think, 12 caterpillar tunnels, and they had a storm come through and it wiped out 10 of them. And we had some of our nor'easters, I think we had 4 or 5 nor'easters right next to it, they were perfectly fine. I'm not a big fan of caterpillar tunnels unless you're gonna do, like you said, take it down the whole time.
Yeah.
And even that, I mean, their rebar that they use for ground posts, the rebar is gonna rust in 2 or 3 years anyway, and then it's gonna do whatever it does to your soil. I would stay away from caterpillars.
In fact, I wouldn't necessarily stay with them if I take it down in the winter,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
the risk of an October wind or even a July, big thunder cell that comes through. It's just attachment to the ground and being able to really smooth winds is really valuable. And I don't know, that's a tough one. Sorry, Jamie, I wish I had better news for you. Any other questions? We're a couple minutes over. I'll be around for a few minutes before I go to the call. Thank you an awful lot. I know some of you are staying. You're welcome to just leave your stuff right where it is. And I'll be good. Thank you.
School was awesome. You should go here. And she was like, the tour guide was too enthusiastic. I was like, oh my God. And she said, and the quad at Wellesley was nicer. I was like, okay, these are the priorities, not me. I was like, they have a robotics lab. They have this, I don't know. Maybe all colleges do now. Well, sure, yeah, sure. That was not, she's like not at all interested in that. Yeah, I was like, you could read your own chrysanthemums. She's like, what's the party scene like?
Well, yeah, Smith, I mean, I went to UMass, so yeah, the party seemed pretty good, but that whole area.
I know my husband was good for the part one.
Yeah.
I was not.
Do you think does it make sense to not go to part two?
It was presented in the write-up that's there, you don't need to do one
Yeah.
or the other.
The first one, I didn't go to the first one. The first one was very much about construction of the hoophouse and exciting. And I think this is about.
Already got it.
And then we get the videos.
Yeah, I'd love to learn how to build it, but it's probably online.
Yeah, you can go back and watch it.
Yeah, so either that or then.
Did you attend part one?
I did, yeah.
Did he talk about trellis thing at all?
I think he's gonna talk, he does it, so, but I think he's gonna talk about it here.
I was in that situation.
Yeah, he's big on cucumber trellis and tomato trellis.
I was asking a question.
He'll answer questions. He's very open to questions.
Sure. So. Fast forward the years. So that's the process.
Also, his email's there. He'll send the first PDF also. But it wasn't- Oh, yeah,
Do you have a?
I don't, but I'm probably a fun, I don't know now, like, I wouldn't agree, but I'm probably gonna apply for kids grants.
Yeah.
It's fun, yeah. We did. Yeah.
It was great.
They've come out, I've already had them do site visits and stuff, so.
It wasn't that much of a mind, but there was a chance to comic way. Like, hey, we need to sign this thing, and, oh, hey, now we need to make sure. I live in the yard, so I'm very good with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was not to agree agents. I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because yeah, tell you, like, okay, people are not working down job. Okay,
Right.
I get consistently do this. We.
No, the
Less about production or.
NCD.
NRCS.
State,
NRCS.
NRCS, think now,
Yeah.
I don't know, anyway, she was extremely helpful,
Yeah, I can see highly.
yeah, Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Are you, where's your,
It's very small farm, 8 to an acre. It was unbelievable that this thing actually fit with all the parameters of the program,
right,
the town and all the rest of it, but it's an 18 by 48. High funnel, but that funding was great and it's they're covered about 50% of it. We get another grant for the future.
where is it, where's your farm?
I'm in Central Mass. This is a part of
It's not called-
Hopton.
Oh, Hopton.
Yeah, right near Hopkinton with America.
Yeah, I've had.
Yeah, yeah, I just. Yeah, I'm at a little farm stand and I just like go out to markets. I grow an unbelievable amount of starter plants in my basement. It works. It's great, but it's extremely part time. This is usually from this idea that it's a way of just earning a living. But it's clearly becoming a hobby and an IRS is gonna be okay with that in 50 years.
I had a,
Oh, because I.
and I used. That's just.
Every blade of grass in my.
They're gone now.
Turning it into.
It's
For me or somebody else.
It's like a good year, a good there, it works. And it wasn't a consideration for NRCS either, right? Because they used to have. I think we have that 1,000 feet. I don't know, just 1,000 square feet.
At the location.
Not the space required.
It's
You're farming your farm.
my town,
So you can access all the grants.
Just, I mean, the distance that they have. Created.
The grant is sorting of conservation trends. From NRCS. You're growing ground, you're getting living soil going, and that's what they're interested in incentivizing. There.
there is some kind of income. You have to prove income from farm.
I had one.
But they might, yeah, with the LLC, but I think you want it, but I needed to. I feel like I couldn't have done it.
I mean, I don't think the income limit is high, but I think you have to, and if that's what they told me, it has to be already cultivation or whatever you're trying to
Plants, well, you know, 15
cover.
planting.
And you have to have a certain income that you get, like it has to be a farm, it's not just your backyard.
Okay, yeah, so maybe I'm Not remembering all those details.
Okay, I am Marcia.
I'm gonna shake your hand this one.
Okay, all right,
Tell me your name.
Marcia.
Yeah.
I wanted to take that. But, you know, there's so many other stuff.
Oh, I know.
So is there any way to get your?
Absolutely. Anyhow,
Yeah, you.
see that email address right there?
Yeah.
Send me an email. I'll send you the
Right.
PDF.
Yeah.
And then your questions is probably will talk.
I'm not quite ready to do the most, that's why I said, even guarding on the budget and the other stuff, so, so, until I get all the stuff together. But I really wanted to see that. I was thinking,
Phone you can fix it. I know. Who wants to name them?
we had some catalogs a while ago. I ended up taking a whole bunch, all of them on the phone, things like, as you said, braising. I just took a whole bunch of catalogs on the phone. Oh, yeah, so as you said, right. I said it was nice.
It was very nice meeting you. Yeah, so what she said I missed, but anyway, call me and you get the people, you have to.
Like a four-star. Yeah, yeah. I've seen her speak.
That's what we have to do.